Good evening and welcome to the Drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station. I'm your host, Roman. We have a great show planned for you today. Please stay tuned for Warriors Talk at 6 p.m. with Rochelle right after the Drive at 5. Tonight, my guest is the National Director of the 1,000 Churches Connected Initiative, and also he's the director with the Operation Push Fellowship Initiative Churches. Please give a warm welcome to the Drive at 5 to Chauncey D. Reverend Chauncey D. Brown. Welcome to the Drive, sir.
Thank you so much for welcoming me, Roman. I'm so glad to be here with you and with all your listeners. I can't wait for our conversation and where that can go today.
Please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station your background.
Yes, indeed. I am a 30-year-old minister from Indianapolis, Indiana. I moved here to the western suburbs in Maywood in 2021 when I became the senior pastor of the Second Baptist Church of Maywood. In my journey, not only do I believe that faith is essential, but also faith without works is dead. So I started working in the civil rights movement back in 2020 in Indianapolis during the George Floyd circumstance. And here we are in 2024, where I have the privilege of learning and working alongside the one and only Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. At the Rainbow Push Coalition here in Chicago. And I have the privilege of serving as the national director of 1,000 Churches Connected.
Explain your position at Operation Push 1,000 Churches Initiative, just in case people don't know.
Absolutely. It's our belief that equity, peace, and justice should be experienced no matter your faith, your religion, your creed, your color. We believe in equality and equity. And so with the 1,000 churches, it's called 1,000 churches, but it's really faith leaders. We want people of all faith to come outside of their four walls and influence politics, give the power back to the people.
We will talk about Rainbow Push Annual Conference, the 56th Annual Conference. 58.
Yes.
My bad. 58. Conference in a second. Let's discuss what's been going on in the news as well as the presidential election. My first question is, what is the religious community plans regarding Sonia Massey, who was shot by a Springfield police officer?
Absolutely. When we look at that, when we look at what I call the Massey massacre, one, that was an assassination of a young lady in her home who was compliant. It is the faith community that should do what Proverbs 31 says, that we speak up for those that have no voice. When you see an injustice, you ought to say something. When you experience what we're experiencing right now, is we saw a murder on national TV. We saw a murder through the body cams, and somehow they want to tell us we didn't see what we saw. Sonia Massey and the faith community is standing behind her. I had a privilege of speaking to her pastor briefly maybe a week and a half ago. I spoke with him, and we are organizing to go down to Springfield along with other groups that have already been marching in Springfield. I'm not sure if you saw Reverend Al Sharpton and Attorney Ben Crump were here in Chicago on the west side at Reverend Marshall Hatch's church. It was a New Mount Pilgrim Baptist church, and had a huge rally for justice. What we're looking in the faith community to do is to push legislation and have someone and groups write what we would like to be the Sonia Massey law. As we know, that officer, I believe his name was Grayson, Officer Grayson should have never been on that police force.
Is there a push? You mentioned legislation. What type of legislation are you talking about?
Well, one thing we want to see for sure is that when someone has been discharged from the armed forces or the military, someone has been fired or hopping police departments, having misconduct in their record at every police department, at some point we have to take, or the police department has to take responsibility for continuing to hire an officer that believes he's above the law.
Is there a push for legislation, which you said there is in Springfield, to adopt the measure that President Biden put place, that he signed an executive order into law? We mentioned this last week with State Representative LaShawn Ford, into law regarding the police database to enforce police officers to start using it on because what's happening now, law enforcement is not doing it. However, should there be a state law that say enforce the database to start using it on, or we're going to restrict your funding source from those departments that don't?
Absolutely. There's law already written. Just even when we look statewide, we look nationally, we look at the executive order that President Biden signed back in 2021, which is the George Floyd Policing Justice and Policing Act. He signed it, and it went nowhere after that. And so I've heard, and I've been part of several conversations with clergy, whether here locally in Chicagoland or nationwide, that is pushing and say, hey, we have this legislation already written. Let's take this and take it to bat. Because while politics and politicians are silent at times.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
However, the state should follow up and enforce it.
Right.
It's there. The state has to enforce it, meaning your state representatives has to follow it up. You guys better do this, or we're going to start cutting funding.
Absolutely. We have to hold our electeds accountable. Make sure that we're telling them what the people want and what the people need. What was eye-opening for me at the Justice for Sonia Massey rally, with over 1,000 people with news stations from all over the country here. Roland Martin was there and filming and doing what Roland Martin does. And I just looked and I scanned the room, and we did not have one elected official in the room for that Justice for Sonia Massey rally, which is concerning to me.
Why is that?
It's concerning to me because our elected officials, I love them and I have really good relationship with several, but it's amazing. They find ways to our churches, to our faith centers, to our communities around election time. But at the assassination of a 36-year-old mother, sister, daughter, we're silent, and that concerns me.
Last week, again, we had State Representative LaShawn Ford, and basically we had a conversation regarding state officials being active. One is the Black Caucus. Is elected officials planning to put pressure on the Black Caucus to do something and do something now while they're getting ready to go back to Springfield?
That is my hope. I can't speak for them, but I know when it comes to the faith community, there are several organizations, Rainbow Push Coalition, the Faith Leaders Network, some of our Baptist districts, such as the Salem Baptist District Association, that are combining and coalescing to ensure that each one of our faith groups, are speaking to our electeds and holding them accountable heading into Springfield. We don't need to wait for them to come up with the legislation. We need to be involved in the building of legislation, as we in the faith community are typically on the ground, and we're hearing what's happening, we're experiencing what's happening, and we want to work with our lawmakers to ensure a better, safer, and more equitable Illinois.
There's some pushback saying that, you know what, we did what we could do. It's there. There's nothing else for us to do. What would you say to that?
Absolutely not. I know it's there, but we all know that a law that's not enforced or legislation that's not enforced, it may never actually reach its potential of saving or keeping a community safe. And so I guess mine would be two words: You said you can do all you can do, and you've done all you can. I'm pushing us to do more. We have to do more. There's more that can be done. Enforcement of law, that we know there's a lot of laws written, but if they're not enforced, what good are they?
Will there be a push to enforce into state law for each officer should have a mandatory insurance in the state of Illinois instead of the cost going to taxpayers? R- It's kind of like your house. You have so many claims per year, so many claims, and then they like, dude, this is too much. Should that be enforced in state law legislation to say, hey, taxpayers, they're tapped out. We're tired of footing the bill. The Macy's family are planning to sue. And there's not going to be like a $1 million, $2 million lawsuit, especially if you're talking about Attorney Ben Crump at the helm. It's going to go up there, and the
That's right.
taxpayers are going to fit the bill. Is it time for religious leaders saying, hey, the law is already here to put the database here, but we're going to add an addendum here for each officers to have their own insurance when they go out on the street?
Absolutely. That's one of the and that's one of the concerns that I was sitting in a roundtable last week with a few of our clergy members that are connected to the Push Coalition, and that was one of the concerns, is that when an officer is in trouble, when an officer gets into a circumstance, as a Sonia Massey assassination, and when we get into these spaces where you have officers on paid administrative leave, and um, sometimes that paid administrative leave turns into a vacation at the taxpayer's expense. You did something wrong, you may have gotten off, and when you come back, you get your back pay and you get all this money, and next thing you know, the taxpayers paid you $1 million if you set out for a couple years. And so, absolutely, there has to be a major push. Has to be a major push, and I believe that would turn down some of these police action shootings that we're seeing, and some of these blatant murders that we're seeing all over this country. I think it would make officers think twice about doing the opposite of what they should be doing, which is protecting and serving.
In the state of California, Los Angeles in particular, the same thing was going on. One of the legislators back in the day, when you had the Rodney King, when you had over and over excessive force, so forth and so on, one legislator had an idea. If you're a new officer, you get rubber bullets, you get bean bags.
Mm.
And if you quick draw McGraw, you can shoot long as the person is alive. It's not going to kill. The rubber bullets, it hurts, it takes you down. That's the only thing you want, to take the person down, arrest them, whatever, or take the person down, see what they're up to, and it's no love, no loss. My question is, as the head of the clergy, could that be one of the solutions to enforce? If you're a new recruit, you're out on the street, you get rubber bullets, you get bean bags. They don't know what you have until you shoot.
Well,
I'm not trying
that's.
to.
I would like to see that. I would need to do more study on the statistics of how successful that was in California. I mean, LA, because I would think that would also put those who are serving at risk. That I don't want them. I don't want. I want everybody to make it home safely.
That's true. However, when you look at the statistics,
Mhm.
it's kind of like, yeah, they, you know, basically if some people know they have a gun, they're going to shoot.
Oh,
So they're
absolutely.
going to chase them.
Yeah.
Some people think it's live ammunition in there. They don't know it's a rubber bullet. They don't know it's a beanbag. You shoot, it bounces off them, but it takes them down.
I think it's a possibility. And when we look, let's look
I'm not saying
specifically,
all officers, to make it
right?
clear. I'm not saying all officers. I'm
Just the
just
new
basic.
recruits.
I'm just saying the new recruits, people who just got hired and they're still becoming familiar. They're not there for a long, they're not seasoned.
Hmm.
And if they need the live ammunition, you call for backup, that situation. Your thoughts?
And I think that could work potentially. We would have to look at staffing in some departments. I know that with speaking with Superintendent Snelling of Chicago Police Department, they're having a lot of problems hiring officers right now. They make a lot of money to start off. If you're 21, you
But
come out.
I mean, not to cut you off
Yeah,
again, that's their own fault.
I, I'm not arguing that
That's
either.
their own fault. The failure of hiring blacks and not it's like this. A lot of if you look at the statistics of how many African Americans have filled out, they're 25, close to 30%.
Mhm.
It's not like 10%, 9%, or something like that. Even the last recruitment, it was 21 point something, still in the 20s.
Right.
So that tells me there's still a lot of interest there. What's the problem that Hispanics is up here in hiring and blacks are still down here, and you have a black superintendent at the helm? And they're lying and basically saying it's the psychological test. And then you look at the Macy's case.
Yeah, when you look at Sonia Massey's case,
I'm sorry, I keep
Officer
mispronouncing
Grayson,
Massey's
he
case.
came in with the aim. He was very clear on his aim in everything we heard over the tape. He said he would shoot her in the face, and he did. And so, I would want a psych evaluation on him. But absolutely, there is definitely some systemic issues within CPD that calls for the imbalanced hiring. And also, I know from when 2020, when we were working in Indianapolis for body camera, Indianapolis did not have body cameras. We pushed our mayor, protested for our mayor to uh, put body cameras, enforce body cameras on all police officers, provide them, and eventually did. We got that done in Indianapolis. But one of the things that I saw was some of the officers that I personally knew, they were dealing with the issue, a trust issue, but also identity issue, because they felt they had to choose because of systemic racism. They had to choose between being black or blue, which the uniform was blue in Indianapolis. It's blue here too, but that was an issue, and I saw several have to go get psychiatric help because of having to choose between the system that hires them and the people that birth them. And so when you look at even trust issues, this Sonia Massey situation again has sent a ripple through the black community. The Dexter Reed case sent a ripple through the black community. There's a major distrust in our community in law enforcement, which makes it a little difficult for us to want to get on to that, to even want to. But I understand over 20% still interested in their applicants, in their applicant rate. But
And
I
do
think
you
there's a
know
trust issue.
like the 20%, 20.1,
Mhm.
20.2% last go round, it was almost less than 1% got hired.
Wow. I did not know that statistic.
Is it time for saying, hey, it's an election year, so you can put the foot to the fire to say, we got to have black psychologists if it comes to psychiatric evaluation to evaluate, because there's psychological depression or whatever is different from ours,
Absolutely.
oppression and stuff
Absolutely.
like that. So I just don't get why we don't have an equilibrium, but each and every election cycle, they're saying that if you talk to the city, they're saying blacks are not interested. You look at the statistics, it says otherwise.
Absolutely. So at that point, one is being the faith community has to be knowledgeable of these statistics. You knew that statistic. I didn't know it. I didn't know how many had um, applied. I didn't know how many were accepted. But to go over 20% and only 1% is accepted, there's an issue there. And so I would like to get into, well, what are the reasons? Is it the psych evaluation? I know with yeah, psych evaluation. One other area that I know was listed was, we understand that
They use marijuana,
marijuana is for sure legal, um, yet it is anti-job um,
but it shouldn't be now.
for us.
It shouldn't be. If they take it, let's say they take marijuana.
Hmm. Yes.
They're not dealing with construction. Marijuana is more laid back than it is aggressive. And it's not about hallucinogen. They're not taking PCP or anything like that. It's more relaxed. And plus, if a person has ailments, inside their body, it helps that. What I'm saying is, if they're not doing it on the job, if they're doing it outside and they have medical prescription and using it, why not hire them?
Well, absolutely. Now, medicinal versus recreational. I understand. If it's medicinal, that's what it's for. I do want the person who is protecting and serving me to be sober minded. I know it should not raise aggression. It should make you more relaxed. But some circumstances, if I have to call the police department, I don't want you relaxed. I want you to be alert. I want you to be able to respond adequately. So of course, definitely not on the job, but that's a discussion that I believe lawmakers are going to have to make if we made it legal. I don't. When I look at that, I look at also. I mean, they're driving. They also have a weapon, and their response times are essential to the
Then it
safety.
comes to a point that if it's driving,
Mhm.
then should we have a marijuana testing, driving while doing marijuana or something like that, a testing type of thing? Because you can say that when you're driving a regular car, you can say that. Then why not? You can test the person before they go out on the street and say, you can have a drink, but not a lot of drinks. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
It,
Meaning that you can have a puff, but not so many puffs. It's like a point oh something that is considered legal, or an ounce or something like that.
Other than medicinal usage of uh, marijuana, um, I'm still gonna I'm gonna stay away from it all the way. I'm gonna stay away from it all the way. Maybe that's why I'm not making the decision because I'm gonna stay away from it, whether I'm about to drive or not. Right. So I don't make that decision, but I do. I want our officers and anybody serving the community to be as sober as possible, because we're just in a time where we need to be on our P's and Q's, at every turn. Any misstep could lead to somebody dying, and I don't want that anywhere.
We have some breaking news. It was reported this morning that by several news outlets that property taxes has been overly assessed in the black community. It's to the point that they're calling for an investigation. Should Operation Push right now as we speak, because the black community said this been going on for decades in the state of Illinois, particularly in Cook County, that people are paying over the amount every single tax period. They're paying over. And KE is not responding. He's been in there for almost 8 years. Tax bills has been late. When tax bills are late, they're going to assess. you're going to pay over. Is it time for Operation Push to have a meeting with Kagi to see why there are years of overly taxing the Black community?
Absolutely. This is a discussion that um, you want to get ministers to start talking. You get them to start talking about why their offerings sometimes are lower in service. And it's not because people don't want to give to God, it's just that they're overpaying everywhere else. When we look at the Black community, your taxes are higher. We knew that, and now there's reports that are just telling us what we already knew. Your insurance is higher in your Black communities. Just everything seems to be a little higher in the Black community, and so absolutely, Rainbow Push Coalition, along with other faith leaders all over the city, are working together. I know we just had a meeting maybe a couple months ago now with our Secretary of State, and his big thing was the insurances. And again, when it comes to the faith community, there are those that are knowledgeable about who to talk to, when to talk to them, how to get to them. And sometimes they go in their silo. And then somebody else who's educated somewhere else, they'll go in their silo. But Rainbow Push is hoping to pull us all together and use the strengths of everyone in the faith community to say, hey, we can all do this together. Because when you can get, I tell people all the time, elected officials, you don't really need more than 10 letters to get their attention. And so what if 100 faith leaders, 200 faith leaders are working together and saying, hey, we're fighting for our people because we're paying higher taxes. We can't afford to live. The people can't afford to live. And we're paying higher taxes, and somehow our neighborhoods are still not up and coming. They're actually being stripped. When you look at a lot of our Black neighborhoods, or predominantly Black neighborhoods, you have education failing. You have ATMs, or maybe not banks. You have or banks you can go into. If you still have a bank in your neighborhood, you might be able to not get a loan. You might not be able to get a loan from them. Your grocery stores. I know living in Maywood, we don't have a grocery store in Maywood yet, but property taxes are just crazy. That's concerning, and that's when the faith community has to come together, and we have to come with the solutions. I'm at a space where I'm not necessarily waiting on elected officials to do. We need to do and hold them accountable. And again, we're in election season. No more performative. Come to my church, say amen, hallelujah, catch the spirit, and then go to the next church and catch the spirit too. Get our vote, and then we don't hear from you, or we don't see the benefit of voting for you. And so we have to. We do. There has to be, the Rainbow Push Coalition has to pull clergy together. Not
How's that going, pulling them together? Is it difficult, or is it, and no disrespect to clergy, you're smiling already. No disrespect. Some pastors or religious clergy members, they can be some divas and prima donnas.
Yes, indeed.
How can you make that work?
Reverend Jesse Jackson, running for president in 84, 88. Now, these are things I've read. I wasn't even alive then. But being able to sit at his feet and listen to his stories, listen to his wisdom, listen to the premise, what made him and makes him so powerful even today is that he was able to pull people around a need. No matter how much of a prima donna or a diva you may be, uh, you have to pay property taxes. I believe that you oftentimes find a sense of pride or maybe even arrogance and that isolated sense of competition over community when, one, you may not live in the community that you serve. Two, if all of your ministry is focused inward and not outward, if you're a church in the community but not a church of the community, you find yourselves not worried about the concerns of the community. And so with that, we're looking at the need. No matter who you are, no matter how much money you have, no matter how many members you have, if your membership is in Cook County, they're dealing with higher than usual property taxes. They're dealing with overpaying property taxes. That's your issue too. It affects your bottom dollar at your church. And so when we get around the needs, everyone needs, I mean, I believe we should have property. And so if we should have property, what is the church doing to ensure that we're not getting overtaxed? If you need, everybody needs insurance, what are we doing to make sure that our communities are not overcharged for insurance? What are we doing to bring grocery stores, credit unions, education to our communities? And so I guess I found myself, there's so many needs in our community. I don't have enough time to really think about me being, oh, I'm the pastor of Second Baptist and that means something. It doesn't mean anything unless my community is blessed by my presence. If it's not blessed by the question my pastor asked and many pastors have asked, if our church was to leave the corner it sits on or the street it sits on, would the community even miss it? And outside of food pantries, sometimes the community would not miss our churches, because we're inward focused. What makes us comfortable inside? I want to be uncomfortable out. I want to be uncomfortable inside to go reach the community and make sure they're comfortable outside.
Getting back to what happened last week, what are your thoughts about Donald Trump doing a Q&A at the annual Association of Black Journalists convention?
When I first saw that he was invited and confirmed and coming, uh, my first question was why? Just why do we want him? Why in the world do we want him to come? That was my thought. But then I also understand, guess what? It's the NABJ, and they should invite presidential candidates to come. Um, when watching the interview or panel discussion, I believe my sister's name is it Rachel Scott?
Yeah, from ABC
Yeah,
News.
she did a wonderful job weathering the storm of Trump. Trump, I believe, in the very first question, he opened up and told the panel how horrible the question was. He's never heard a question so terrible, and I don't know. There's something in me that just don't want to see our sisters be berated by a man like Trump, and that's Chauncey Brown's opinion. That's not Rainbow Push Coalition. That is Chauncey Brown. Um, and so I wasn't thrilled about it. Wasn't excited about it. Um, and I know that others weren't. I know the vice chair of the convention stepped down, um, and openly said that leadership didn't. Some parts of the leadership team was not aware of this, what we called breaking news, but it was planned by the chairman.
Who since stepped down.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't really, I really don't want to hear Trump
What
much.
are your thoughts on Trump disrespecting the Black woman, the Black community? He basically disrespected Africa, calling it um, a-hole countries.
Absolutely. Immediately, uh, aside from pastor, aside from civil rights activist, aside from any title I have, one of my greatest titles I have is dad, and specifically a girl dad. I've got 3 little girls. And when I think of Chrisette, Kamora, and Carrington, 8, 6, and 3, uh, I can't condone and even teach them that it's okay to speak to anyone the way former President Trump speaks, especially when I see him disrespect not only those that sit on the panel at the NABJ, when I see him uh, come for I won't say our girl, my girl, Kamala Harris, um, something in me says there's no way possible we can condone this on the national stage, because on the national stage in pop culture, that's what's being taught to our children. And when they can't affect your now, they'll reach for the seed or your next. And I can't teach my young ladies that a man should speak to women the way he speaks to women.
You are supporting presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Why?
When I look at this presidential race, uh, I am concerned that that there are so many just anti Kamala Harris. I'm like, they both have track records, both uh, as vice president, and then President Trump has been president before. When we look at some things that matter to me, having young girls, school age children, and I look to them going to college, I look at a presidency in the Biden Harris administration that has forgiven over $100 billion in student loan debt. I look at 16 plus $1 billion to HBCUs. I look at the expansion carried over, but the expansion and increase of healthcare. When I look at the demographic in my church, a over 60 demographic, not the healthiest church in the world, and I look at capping insulin prices, which were astronomical, and some people could not afford it. I look at the needs of my community from school age to senior citizen, and I say, at this moment, uh, VP Harris is my choice. Now, I will say that when we get out to vote, not not voting just party, not voting just because of race, but we're voting recognizing that the vote is not the last step, but it's one of the first steps to using your voice. I don't care who's in office. We got to hold them accountable, whoever's there.
Don't you think that's the problem? Holding them accountable when they're in office. That's the same thing the Republicans are saying. Well, we got to hold, Trump accountable. Might as well vote for him. He's been there already. I don't get the logic, but I do want to ask you, what does a President Harris, Kamala Harris administration mean to the Black religious community and the Black community as a whole?
When I look at the religious community, um, it's not that I believe that Kamala Harris is the Vice President Harris is just. Uh, I'm not picking her to be my priest, right? She's going to be the president, which means there's going to be things I don't agree with. But when I look at how the religious community has approached the Biden Harris administration, they've been more open to the plight of Black America. When I look at what it means to Black America right now, well, we heard in the presidential debate between President Biden and former President Trump, the adage black jobs. Um, we've had a black job. In 2008, we elected President Obama. But I think to see a woman in that office, it lifts up the head of my three little girls at home. Um, they they've seen pictures of Barack Obama, but to see someone that represents them, someone that they can relate to. Not saying that she is just, to see that in at this early stage in their life is going to be a blessing for young Black girls across America, for women across America. This is not just Black, but just women across America. We've not seen a woman president in this country.
The Democratic convention is coming to Chicago in 2 weeks. What policies would you like to hear from the convention floor?
Well, that's one of what I want to hear right now, especially in this presidential race. I think we have gotten caught up in the. I won't even say think. I've seen it. We are excited across this country. You've had every group of people have fundraising calls for Vice President Harris. I think we're excited, but what concerns me is that as of right now, I want to hear counter policy to what we know as Project 2025. Project 2025 is what, 900 pages of policy, procedure, and plan. And I would like to see the pivot in the Democratic platform, away from just telling us Project 2025 is bad. We know that. Telling us that Donald Trump is interesting. We know that. I want to hear not just what you've done. I want to hear, what are we going to do when it comes to healthcare in America? What are we going to do in the education system? This is part of, no, this is the entire drive of the Rainbow Push Coalition's conventions this year. Last year, we had the pivot. We pivoted in our new president or Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes, who since then has resigned. But this year, we're shifting from the pivoted leadership to, well, let's pivot to the people's agenda, which is our entire theme this year, where I'm not expecting political parties to come up with an agenda. We are pulling people from all races and creeds, faith centers, and uh, everywhere from the streets to corporate America will converge on the Rainbow Push Coalition. And we're going to come up with a Black education agenda. We're going to come up with, what does healthcare look like, as we have full churches full of people that are of poor health. And so we want to make sure that the people create the agenda. I believe if we can get the people to coalesce around an agenda, we can shift politics. We can influence politics and not allow politicians to keep handing us an agenda without consulting the people.
Crime is another issue that's facing Chicago, especially black on black crime, is getting more vicious and younger. We had a deadly weekend again, 45 got shot, shootings. They said 9 shot and killed. School is back in session in a couple of weeks. Crime in our community is getting worse and worse. What is the religious community plan to curb the problem of crime?
We were just speaking a group. There was a group of clergy, Reverend Jesse Jackson, the Rainbow Push Coalition. We met with CPD chief or Superintendent Snelling, and one of the questions almost posed just as you just questioned is, what can the faith community do? Well, one thing we want to do is, each faith assembly has to, and there'll be some training within the next month or so. Each faith community has to know the demographic of not just their community that drives into their church on the weekends, but the community that surrounds their church. One thing I do, when I first came to Maywood in 2021, I would walk to my barber, and people in my church would say, "Rev, you need a ride? You need a ride?" I said, "No, I'm walking the neighborhood. I'm learning the people that I serve, because you cannot serve people you're scared of. You cannot serve people you don't even know exist in the community." And so each week I would walk, and everybody would ask me if I need a ride. I said, "No, I got to walk the neighborhood so people know this is not just Maywood, but this segment between 13th and 15th, between Washington and St. Charles, is Second Baptist country. This is our land, and this, I want people to be deterred from crime because they know we're walking the neighborhood. We're seeing things. We have to get out and own our communities. The faith community cannot just receive from the community, cannot just have bodies from the community coming in, but we have to go out and find out and meet the needs of our community individually. A lot of times I think we focus citywide, we think national, sometimes we think international, but we have to become neighborhood pastors and neighborhood churches again. Social media has taken us to the world, but whenever I find an inspirational pastor of the world, or in the world, I always try to find out what they're doing in their community.
What people should expect at the 58th annual Rainbow Push Convention?
Well, we are jam-packed, August 15th through 18th. We have sitting international presidents. The president of Nigeria is going to be here when we get into foreign policy. But when we look at the agenda for this year's 15th through the 18th, Rainbow Push Coalition International Convention. Again, I told you we were going to do our Black education agenda. And so we have educators from across the country that will convene on the Rainbow Push Coalition headquarters. Our convention this year, we're bringing it home. We're going to be at the Rainbow Push Coalition headquarters all week long. And we're kicking off Thursday with our education policy panels. We're going to have panels. We're going to have conversations. We're having a back to school event on Thursday. And so all Thursday, we're just going to talk about education, what's wrong with education. But I don't know. I think we're at the point where we're done talking about what's wrong with it because we've had those continued conversations over and over and over again. We want to leave this week's convention with an education plan starting Thursday. And then August 16th, of course, we have the Women and Labor's agenda, Women in Labor. We're going to have everyone from we've got people from the Chicago Sky that are coming. We've got Ms. Valerie Daniels Carter, owner of the Milwaukee Bucks, as well as a ton of Burger King franchises. She's coming from Milwaukee, and she's going to empower young women of all races and creeds to elevate. And when I say empower, she's not just going to empower, but she's going to equip them to elevate in this world that is male dominated, and show that maybe sometimes women do it better. That's one of her mottos. And then August 17th, now this is the day, this is dear to me. I need every faith leader here. August 17th, that's Saturday, August 17th at 8 a.m. We're going to pull all the faith leaders together, as many as we possibly can. And we're going to look at what a faithful community looks like, building a healthy community of faith that should deter crime. It should increase education endeavors. It should increase employment and overall wealth in every community if we do this thing the right way. We have Dr. William Barber that's going to be in town with us. We've got Reverend Mark Thompson that's going to be in town with us. And then to close out the convention on August 18th, it is our International Policy Day. So we're building this convention. The People's Agenda is being built locally to go internationally. Each day we're stepping further. We're going to be on the south side of Chicago. We're going to stretch to the west side of Chicago, through all of Chicago. Then we'll hit the state. Sonia Massey and police reform has become a big agenda that we're just going to talk about and formulate throughout the convention. Realize we know, as you know, civil rights and social justice is not on a schedule. It just shifts. And when something happens, we've got to shift with it.
But don't you think it's important? There is going to be a tribute to Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on it?
Yes, The Nation magazine will be at the Rainbow Push Coalition August 18th, starting at 6 p.m. That is 6 p.m. We'll have a reception after the program from 8 to 9, but 6 p.m. We have Senator Bernie Sanders is going to come in and speak on behalf of Reverend Al Sharpton of the National Action Network. He was here last week for the rally. He's going to do his show on MSNBC. He's going to do his show live from the Rainbow Push Coalition headquarters. I'm just telling you, you want to be there. Everybody that is anybody is going to be there at 6 p.m. at the Rainbow Push Coalition headquarters to honor our freedom fighter, our social justice activist, our drum major for social justice, Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. And so you want to be there. And listen, registration for the entire conference, general registration is $35. If you are a student, you're an active student, or you're a senior citizen, it's only $15 for you to register for the entire conference for 3 days of civil rights and social justice and empowering and creating a people's agenda is $15. Our women's networking luncheon, which is on that Women in Labor Day, August 16th, that's going to be $100, and it comes with a gift. And you know, our ladies are the best at giving gifts. And then our Faith Leaders Luncheon, we want you to be there. That's going to be right before our Saturday morning forum broadcast. The Faith Leaders Breakfast will be at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. It's early, but we know everybody's got things to do Saturday, and we want you to be there at 8 a.m. And the Faith Leaders Breakfast will pour in to our broadcast, and that is a $50 breakfast. I know that people are listening, like, man, how am I going to remember that? You can go to rainbowpush.org, become a member, rainbowpush.org, or you could text push to 41444, and we will get you the link to register for the convention. We are looking for a strong convention this year. This is most likely, I will say, and since my voting time, now that doesn't say a ton. I wasn't 18 until 2012, so I've only voted a couple of times. But this is the most consequential election that I've seen in my lifetime. And so we'll be doing voter registration the entire convention. Not only do we want you to use your voice in November, we want you to be registered by October. And we really want you to come and register for the convention right now and be at the Rainbow Push Coalition August 15th through 18th, because before you lift your voice in November, we want the people to lift their voice so that we can submit an agenda to those at the DNC, those that are elected officials right now. And we want to submit an agenda that we believe the people have created, because politics should work bottom up.
Is it okay if I give you a couple of suggestions? You said the president of Nigeria is going to be there. Right now, there is some uprising in Nigeria because of the situation of high taxes and famine. Same thing is going on in Haiti. What is the big, let's, the government officials here in the United States are not doing anything. They're raising money for Ukraine, the famine in Ukraine, the famine, it's everything Ukraine, Gaza, Ukraine. Nothing about Haiti, nothing about what's going on in Nigeria. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. We have to, this is becoming, and if we don't make it personal, we'll be in trouble. We have to, or what we say at Rainbow Push is that if it happens in Gaza and it's happening in Haiti and they ignore it there, this is why it's being ignored here in this country. We are, we are finding billions for Ukraine. We are finding billions for the genocide of Gaza. We are finding money. We are just writing legislation. We're writing money after money after money. And we still have people in this country that are starving, that can't afford healthcare, that can't afford property. Not only just in America, we can't be so selfish to believe, because we do know that what's happening here is happening on a whole nother scale to our brothers and sisters in Haiti, our brothers and sisters in Gaza. We have to be careful in this country, especially those who are experiencing oppression at the hand of this country. We have to be careful to not separate ourselves from what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Haiti, what's happening in Nigeria, because it has happened and will continue to happen on us right here in this country.
Okay, we're going to have a hard wrap. That's going to do it for us on The Drive at 5. Thanks to Earl Winfrey, our executive producer, Wanda, who's behind the scenes. You guys have a wonderful week.